Today, I want to talk about Polespears. Let's talk about differences between roller and standard. Let's talk about differences between aluminum and composite. Let's talk about differences between lightweight and heavy spears. We're going to run through all the different options we have here at the Neritic shop, and I'm going to talk about how it's useful for you in your different scenarios. Let's talk about the differences between a standard Polespear and a roller Polespear. A standard Polespear has a loop band like this. You put your hand in the looped band, and right here, this is what we call point zero. At this point, there is no stretch to the band, and if you let go, the Polespear doesn't go forward. It drops. This means that the back 2 feet of this Polespear has no power. The second that you pull forward, this Polespear has power. Compared to roller Polespears, standard Polespears have much more initial velocity. They also have more power in the beginning of the shot. This is beneficial if you have a fish in a rock or a cave and you have to put the Polespear very close to the fish itself. It means you're gonna have the most pop initially. Roller Polespears have much more velocity at the end of the shot. This is a roller Polespear. You put your hand in the loop like this and you pull forward. The reason roller Polespears are preferred for long-range distance shots is because you utilize the back 2 feet where you don't utilize that in a standard. As you can see, I'm going to let go, and the band comes all the way back to the end of the spear. With a standard spear, when you let go, do you see where my hand ends up? There's a big difference. Let's talk about when it's useful to use a roller Polespear and when it's useful to use a standard Polespear. As I mentioned before, if you have a fish that's in a rock and you're able to put the tip of the spear very close to the fish, you're going to want to use a standard spear. If you use a roller spear and you put the tip right up next to the fish, because it starts off slow, it won't generate the force and velocity necessary to penetrate the fish. Instead, it'll just push the fish until the fish is up against something, and then it'll try to penetrate. But at that point, it's lost most of its momentum. If you're swimming around with a roller Polespear and you corner a fish and get it rocked up, I suggest that you take the shot from a little further away, at least giving yourself 1 to 2 feet distance from that fish before letting go of that shot. One of the things that's not talked about is hand placement. Standard Polespears allow a convenient hand placement in the sense that you don't have to reach all the way to the back of the spear to get the roller started. The standard spear, you can start about here, and as you see, you only have one movement. With roller Polespears, you typically have 2 movements. The more movement you have around fish, the more likely it is that you can scare them. Another topic that's never discussed and cannot be quantified or measured is the pop. Standard Polespears, when you let them go, create a massive pop. When they create that massive pop, they have a lot of vibration. Fish feel vibration. Have you ever been Houdini'd or matrixed by a fish where they turn at the last second and you barely skim them? That's because when you let go of a standard spear, that initial pop sends a vibration that the fish feel, and they're able to move their head. One of the benefits of the roller is that it doesn't have that initial pop. When you let go of a roller, it's quiet. It starts off slow, it doesn't have that initial vibration, and by the time that it gets closer to the fish and starts to speed up, it's too late and that fish isn't on the run already. Now that we've discussed the differences between roller Polespears and standard Polespears, I want to talk about the difference between a lightweight spear and a heavy spear. The difference between a composite spear and an aluminum spear. Heavier spears made of aluminum typically have more mass. The more mass you have, the more penetration. When you have more mass, it is easier for the Polespear to penetrate large fish. If you are targeting smaller, more agile fish, a lightweight composite spear is probably better for you. I want you to think about it like this. If you're gonna pack up your house and move, do you think it's better to use a small sedan that's good for gas mileage, or a truck or a U-Haul that gives you more space to pack your stuff? The same is true for Polespears. If you're going after big bruiser fish that are stuck up inside of holes, you might want to go with something that's heavier, stronger, and more durable. If you're looking to target fish that are fast, agile, and out in the open, I would not recommend a heavier spear. I would recommend something that's lighter and easier to maneuver. Something else to consider is, what kind of environment are you hunting? Are you hunting fish under ledges and entering cave systems, or are you hunting out in the open? The length of the spear is important. One of the things I want to mention is each one of these spears are modular and come in 3 sections. That means that you can set them up to be shorter or longer depending on what you're using. If you're hunting underneath rocks and giant cave systems, I would recommend something in that 7 to 8 foot range. This gives you the ability to shoot fish before they enter the cave, but if they do enter the cave, you can get underneath and get a shot on. Speaking of getting underneath a cave, We designed what we call the Cave Digger. It's a 4-foot roller pole spear which allows you to get up and underneath tight spaces with little to no drag, just in case you have a fish that's rocked up and you need to get into it. Now, let's talk about the difference between aluminum and composite. Composite spears are much lighter and much easier to swim around with. It makes it easier if you're swimming all day, you don't have something heavy to carry around. Think about running a marathon with leg weights. It's probably going to be easier if you don't. The only downside to a composite material, whether it's fiberglass or carbon fiber, is that when they break, they typically snap and shatter. This is not something that you can repair on the fly, and especially if you're in a remote island in the Bahamas, it means the Polespear is done. Although aluminum Polespears are heavier and slower, they do give you a little bit of forgiveness. Let's say you bend an aluminum Polespear. One of the benefits is you can put it back in the rod holder and bend it back. It may not be perfect, but we're talking about close hand-to-hand combat. We're not shooting a spear gun, so even if it's slightly bent, chances are you'll still be able to finish your trip and land a few fish. Now that we've talked about roller versus traditional, composite materials versus aluminum, heavy versus lightweight, I want to talk to you about the minor details that make each one of these Polespears different. First, I want to talk about the difference of tips. The Neritic Polespears use a magnetic slip tip. As you can see, there's no rubber band and it's not falling off. The Koa Pierce and Rife Mamba both use a rubber band or elastic system that keeps the tip on. Let's talk about the differences between a rubber band system and a magnetic system. The rubber band system is used across most Polespears. The reason most Polespears use this rubber band system is because it keeps this line nice and tucked. The benefit of keeping the line nice and tucked is you can maneuver the Polespear around sea fans or structure without the line getting caught. It also makes the Polespear more hydrodynamic as it goes through the water. There are two downsides of using a rubber band system. If you break your rubber band and you don't have an extra, there's no way to keep this tip on the Polespear. The other downside is, let's say you shoot a fish in a rock. Now that fish is pinned. If you have no way of getting the fish from this angle and you have to shoot it through another side, you have no choice but to cut this line. As you see, there's no way to get this up and over the injector rod. The only way to take off a slip tip using a rubber band system is to take the shooting line up and over the injector rod. If you do not put the slip tip through the rubber band system and simply put it through this loop, up and over the injector rod to keep it on, and put the tip on, as you can see, the tip will just fall off. The third and final downside to using a system like this is if you snap the injector rod at the threads, there is no way for the slip tip to be held and the fish will swim away. With that said, that is very rare and probably not going to happen. Now let's talk about the positives and negatives of using a magnetic slip tip system with a pigtail swivel. The obvious negative is that this line is drooped down. Unfortunately, because the magnet is so strong, if you were to tighten this line with a O-ring or rubber band, it would actually make it very difficult for the tip to come off. If you're loaded, chasing a fish, and maneuvering around sea fans and corals, this extra line right here could potentially get snagged and in the way. With that said, the positive side is you don't need a rubber band to keep it on. All you need is to put it on the tip and it's not coming off. One of the other benefits is once you do have a fish speared, let's say it's in a rock like this. The fish is in the rock here and you are unable to pull the fish out this way, but you can shoot it through another side. It is very easy to take this off using the pigtail swivel. 1, 2, 3, and it's off. I can't tell you how many times it's been super useful to take the slip tip off the pigtail swivel, allowing us to pull the fish out from another angle. This is even useful when we're hunting hogfish, mutton snapper, and Nassau grouper that end up inside of a hole in an awkward situation. Something else I want you to notice is you can still put the slip tip up and over the injector rod and the magnet will still work. So just because you're using a magnet doesn't mean you have to use a pigtail swivel. And the same holds true for using one of these spears that uses a rubber band system. You do not have to only put it through. You can cut this cable and add a pigtail swivel, which can help avoid the issue of potentially having the injector rod break and you lose your fish. Now you would still be able to use the rubber band, keep your line tight, and not lose your fish if the injector rod snaps. It's just something you're gonna have to modify because they don't sell them this way. If you buy the Polespear in the store, we can modify or customize any of your finishing touches. Now that we've talked about the difference between the rubber band system and the magnetic slip tip, I want to talk about the differences in the fit and finish of these spears. First, I want to talk about the Rife Mamba. The Rife Mamba is incredibly light, but very sturdy and durable. I'm trying to bend and flex, and there's not a lot of bend. This means that you can use a lightweight Polespear on big fish. Because the Polespear is so light, it doesn't need that much force to push it. They also have a very nice roller system. After you've used your band for a while and it's time to get a new one, you can actually take the handle off and just order a new band. You don't need to get a new handle every single time. That's a pretty useful feature. They have a stopper, which means when you let it go, you're never going to hear a clack or damaging of your stainless steel hardware. It's a very nice touch. Great job by Rife. You can also see you have a fixed anchor point for the roller. This is a very nice touch as well because you don't have to guess on where you should put the pre-tension, making it easy for you to get in the water and start shooting fish. Another feature that I really like is the improved rubber band system. Some of the other Polespears in the past had a very thin rubber band, the same type of rubber bands you would use to make a rubber band ball, and those rubber bands pop and snap very easily. This is a little bit more durable, but it's not too strong, meaning it makes it very easy for the tip to come off. Something else I'd like to mention is they added a crimp with shrink wrap over it. Another feature I really like is the use of spectra. This means it's not going to cut through fish as easily as cable, but the one downside is it does make it easier for gill plates or rocks to potentially cut your shooting line. As opposed to using a rubber ring, they use a stainless steel ring, which means if the rubber band's going to pop, it's not going to be on your ring, it's going to be on this piece right here. One of the final features I want to talk about for the Rife Mamba is the knurling on the injector rod. The knurling on the injector rod allows you to get grip and undo the injector rod if for whatever reason you have corrosion buildup between the injector rod and the nose piece. Now, let's talk about the Koa Pierce. The Koa Pierce is extremely lightweight. Of the Polespears we offer, it is the lightest and, in my opinion, the fastest. This spear is lightning quick, but because it's so light, it does have some penetration issues on larger fish. I use this Polespear to target porgies, muttons, hogfish, and smaller groupers, and I was able to shoot them without any problem. Again, because it's so lightweight, I was able to shoot fish at distance and also hunt agile fish that are very squirrely and can turn on a dime. I would not recommend this spear for a very large fish, but most people who go to the Bahamas and want something to eat, this is an excellent choice. As you can see, it has the yellow grip, yellow connectors, and yellow end. This makes it very easy to see when you have a fish stuck in the rocks and your Polespear is covered in clouded sand and silt. Now, let's talk about the rubber band system. This bungee is the same bungee they use on their spear guns, and I can tell you, this is probably not what's going to break. With that said, they do have an O-ring to keep this line tight. While I was on my trip, we did have an O-ring break, and I didn't have a backup. So I had to get creative and come up with other solutions. If you're gonna use this Polespear on a trip, I recommend having multiple of these O-rings to make sure that you can still use their slip tip system. Now, let's talk about the slip tip system. The coated cable is extremely nice. As I mentioned before, cable can cut through a fish and tear the meat. The coated cable is a nice in-between of the Spectra and the open cable. They also added a durable thick loop and the shrink cable over the crimps, making it less likely for tearing of the fish. One of the nice features of the Koa Pierce is this indentation on the injector rod. This flat on the injector rod allows you to use a pair of vice grips, crescent wrench, or pliers to get the injector rod out of the nose piece if you've left it in there too long and you have some corrosion buildup. Lastly, I want to talk about the difference between the Bantam and the Big Blue. As mentioned before, these are aluminum Polespears, so they're a little heavyweight and they're probably not going to be as fast as these composite spears. With that said, they do have a little bit more penetration, and I'm able to use these spears on big grouper as well as some of the smaller fish. In some cases, when we're using the Big Blue, it's overkill on the smaller hogfish and grouper, and it's heavy to lug around. The Blue Bantam is a nice mix of speed, power, and durability. I would not recommend using this spear for a 40 or 50 pound grouper. For that, I'd recommend the Big Blue, but for all your hogfish, mutton, and small grouper up to 30 pounds, this is an excellent choice, and I highly recommend it for your next Bahamas trip. The Neritic spears do not use a rubber band system to keep the slip tip on. As I mentioned before, that is a downside if you're navigating through corals or any sea fans, but it does come with a nice coated cable loop here. Using the pigtail swivel and the coated cable does give you the option of being able to shoot a fish through the other side of the rock and quickly detaching the fish. As I mentioned, we've shot a lot of fish this way, and it's been extremely useful so we don't have to cut the cable or the shooting line. Lastly, I want to make sure you're aware that all of these spears are in fact modular. They all come in standard or roller. So really it comes down to what's the best use case for you. And my suggestion would be call us, come into the shop, send us an email, carrier pigeon, get in contact with myself or somebody from the store, and we're going to help you choose the right tool for your trip.